Hey there, Year 11s. We're going to talk through task number 2 now. This is your historical study task, and it's all about trying to work out, or trying to argue, just how important JFK's assassination was in light of basically everything else that he had done while he was President of the United States. So this task is an argumentative essay. Okay, and as we scroll through on the task sheet here on the left, we've got 3 different propositions. Now, a proposition is simply a sentence which you need to argue how much you agree with that statement. You need to argue just how much you think that statement is true. Okay, so our 3 propositions that we have here are as follows. Number 1, it is clear that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in assassinating JFK. Number 2, the Soviet Union were the most likely to want Kennedy dead. And 3, John F. Kennedy will be remembered more for his death than his accomplishments as President of the United States. Now, as part of writing an essay, what kinds of things will I expect you to do? I'll expect you to research. I'll expect you to reference those sources appropriately. But essentially what we're looking for is an essay of 3 paragraphs with an introduction and a conclusion. And all of that should be about 1,000 words. So, what I've done here over on the right hand side is to try and talk you through how you would use those 3 paragraphs the best possible way to be able to maximize what you're trying to discuss. So briefly going to talk through each of these 3 essay questions and explain how you would try to go to argue that. So the first one, it is clear that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in assassinating John F. Kennedy. The important part here is this phrase here, that he acted alone. And so what this question is asking you to do is to consider, okay, what evidence is there that he did act alone, that he was solely responsible for the assassination? And is there evidence that perhaps there were other people involved and that it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald doing what he wanted to do to make it happen? And so, because the question has said that it's clear that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, what we need to do in our first paragraph, whether you agree with the statement or not, we still need a paragraph that discusses that. So our first paragraph has to be about, okay, what evidence do we have, what do we know about how Lee Harvey Oswald may have acted alone? Because we need to be able to argue the flip side, we need to be able to argue that maybe it isn't clear that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Maybe there was someone else involved, and so our paragraph 3 needs to discuss evidence of some kind of conspiracy, and whatever you decide that conspiracy to be, maybe it's got something to do with the Warren Commission and their findings of the magic bullet theory, maybe it's got something to do with international involvement, whoever you think might be responsible, but you pick one of those conspiracies to talk about in that paragraph. And that leaves us with paragraph 2, because if you believe that it is true that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, then we need to try and find another aspect of that which we can discuss here as paragraph 2. Or, if you do think that it was more a result of a conspiracy, then we can use the second paragraph to talk about a different conspiracy to the one that you would do in paragraph 3. Okay, so for example, I might choose to do paragraph 1, evidence of Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone, but then paragraph 2, my conspiracy might be about the mafia, and then paragraph 3, my paragraph will probably be about Russian involvement. And that would be how I would get around this essay. If I have 2 paragraphs that say it was more a conspiracy, then in my conclusion I'll be saying it's not clear that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, that actually potentially is not true. Okay. For question number 2, the Soviet Union were the most likely to want Kennedy dead. This one is a bit more straightforward. The key phrase here is the Soviet Union were the most likely. And so because the Soviet Union is mentioned specifically, our paragraph 1 has to talk about why the Soviet Union wanted Kennedy dead. But from there, we can either decide that yes, they were the most likely to want him, but there were others, or yes, they wanted him dead, but there were others who were more likely to want him dead. And so paragraphs 2 and 3 will be about 2 different groups who also wanted Kennedy dead. Now that could be Lyndon B. Johnson, it could be the Israelis, the Soviet Union, the Cubans, a whole range of different groups of people, the mafia. Any one of those groups would be your focus in paragraph 2, and then a third one would be your focus in paragraph 3. But ultimately, what you have to argue in the conclusion is whether or not the Soviet Union were the most likely, or whether someone else was more likely. In paragraph 3, proposition number 3, John F. Kennedy will be remembered more for his death than his accomplishments as President of the United States. Key phrases here: remembered more for his death than his accomplishments. And so because the question says, the proposition states that his death is more important, we have to talk about that in paragraph number 1. And we'll talk about the legacy, I suppose, of the assassination and the way that that shaped the way America viewed the world. But then from there, we need to consider the flip side. Okay, well, what were his accomplishments? What did he manage to do while he was president? And is that something that is more memorable than his death? So paragraph 2 might be a focus on civil rights and talking about the progress that he made there. Paragraph 3 then would probably be something either the space race or international relations, and how well did that manage to shape the way that we remember him. Ultimately, though, in the conclusion, your argument needs to be that either his death was more important or something around his accomplishments that was more important. Right. So you're going to pick one of these 3 propositions. Doesn't matter which one you choose. I've given you a bit of a guide as to how to go about trying to structure the paragraphs, but your job for the rest of this lesson and moving into next week is to make sure that you've got the evidence, the research to back up these lines of argument so that you are able to write your paragraph successfully in next week's lessons. So good luck, pick a pretty solid proposition and get stuck straight into that research.